Perfect. Okay, it is recording. So I would like to begin today's talk by doing a territorial acknowledgement. So I would like to begin by recognizing the land on which most of us find ourselves today and encourage all of you who are on Indigenous land to also recognize and honor the land on which you are on. So for the Youth Research Chair, we are in Montreal, or known traditionally in Kanien'kehá:ka Tiohtià:ke, located on unceded Kanien'kehá:ka lands, a historic gathering place for several First Nations. Today we recognize that the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is the custodian of these lands and waters. And so for today's talk, we have 4 panelists. We have Michelle Smith, we have Pasha Partridge, Morgan Phillips, and Sophie Tukalak, and Natasha Blanchet-Cohen, who will be moderating today's talk.
Hi, everybody. Bonjour, Kwe. It's wonderful to see everybody. This is actually our first time that we're seeing everybody in a Miziko's, and we find it's much better than doing the webinar when we only see the panelists. So I will not really facilitate the conversation. It's really more of a talking circle, and Michelle Smith will engage the speakers in different questions that we've discussed previously. But I just wanted to say that we're really excited to hear about this wonderful initiative. Some of you might have are familiar with some of the work that's been happening for the last 5 years, I believe. An incredible teamwork of researchers with community partners and youth. So we're really interested in both the process of how you came about realizing this initiative, and also what are the outcomes that result from it, and what are the next steps. So I'm going to leave it to Michelle to facilitate the conversation and share some of the incredible products that you have been realizing.
Miigwech, Natasha. Kanchi Kiowel, Michelle Smith Dishnakashin, Winnipeg Duchin, Michifnia. My name is Michelle Smith. I'm a Métis from Manitoba. Been living here in Tiohtià:ke for many years. And thank you so much, Natasha and Alicia and the youth chair, for inviting us to share our experience today. It's always really exciting to share. We're so excited about our project. So it's really nice to see your faces and have you all here to spend this hour with us. I'm the principal investigator of the project, the First Peoples Post-Secondary Storytelling Exchange. I'm going to just pass it on to my other panelists just to do a brief introduction before we get into the content. So Morgan.
So Gwe, everybody, Gwe, hello everyone, greetings everyone. Morgan Gahanduni Yujuts Phillips. My name is Morgan Phillips. I'm from the community of Kahnawake. I'm from the Wolf Clan family. I've been part of the First Peoples Post-Secondary Storytelling Project since almost the beginning in 2016. And yeah, so today we're going to share with you some of the things that we've been doing for the past 5 years. We're in the dissemination phase of the project right now. And my role in the project was really about helping to coordinate the research. And I have some experience in Indigenous research methodologies and participatory research. And so central to this project was really about working with upcoming scholars and really training them on how to conduct really good ethical research in a decolonizing way. So we hope to share some of that with you today. Yeah, thank you.
Pasha.
Sorry. Atika Pasa. Kujua miongotsunga inutsunga Kanawagi miongotungalo Kanien'kehá:ka Tungalo. Hi, my name is Pasha. I'm an Inuk from Kuujjuaq and Kanien'kehá:ka from Kahnawake. I've been part of the project since the beginning, since 2016. I first joined as a participant, then later as a research assistant. I had the amazing opportunity to make my own film with the project, which I'll show a little bit later. My role in the project was to attend conferences to share my educational journey. I also transcribed interviews and also did a little bit of data analysis with Morgan. My favorite memory of the project was attending a big international conference in Illinois where we got to share our educational journey to a bunch of academics. It was quite interesting because we got to learn about research projects from around the world as well. So that's a little bit of what I've done throughout the project. And I'll pass the mic to Sophie.
Hey, Ooh, I feel like I have an echo here. Hi, Sophie Tukalak nga, buon timir nga, ko chame pero ne nga mana ilisa ko nga damani man chame, hikak tukalak nga, aleving nga ikaro ko na ni kamatat nga. Hi, my name is Sophie Tukalak. I'm from originally from Nituk. I grew up in Kutrak. I was currently a student at Concordia, but right now I'm taking the semester off and working full time. And I had the chance and privilege to be a storyteller, but also help with some of the translations for with my mother, and also to help provide the English subtitles that everyone can read. So pleased to be here. Nice to see familiar faces. So many faces I haven't seen since the pandemic. So hi, everyone.
Nakermik, Nyawa, Miigwech, Sophie, Pasha, Morgan. So happy to be here with my fellow collaborators. So this project, yeah, as Natasha said, we started in 2015-ish, really. That's when the project concept emerged. And, you know, as you may recall, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report had just come out. I was faculty at Dawson, as was my colleague, Susan Briscoe, who was English faculty. She's the one really that came up for the concept of the project. She's since passed on. She passed on during this project. And, you know, she's really left a legacy, I think, with the community that we've been able to create. And the relationships we've been able to form. Susan was a wonderful poet, a talented writer, and she really recognized the power of stories and storytelling. And, you know, while we've come out with some tangible recommendations that are based on the lived experience of youth, primarily youth and Indigenous families and graduates, tangible recommendations that we're going to be working on putting forward and advocating with our colleges and universities and ministry and whatnot. Really central to this project has been process and relationships, and stories are about the relationship between the giver and the receiver. So I think for all of us involved in that process, I mean, our storytelling exchanges involved over 100 storytellers. So that's so much spirit going out into the world. And I feel like as a team, it's so much about, you know, recognizing that responsibility to honor and to care for those stories as well as for the storytellers. So the process of doing the project was about also creating a space, I suppose, or an environment or a context where people could be comfortable, where we could have ceremony and food and safe spaces and provide the storytellers with a lot of, I don't know, like encadrement kind of, and flexibility as well. So that's been really key to the project. The exchanges took place in talking circles, where we would hear multiple stories with ceremony, with an elder present. They also took place between individuals. We had a family of 3 generations share their educational journey. Some of the stories were audio recorded, some of the stories were video recorded. So those are on the website, which we launched last February. So you'll see on the website, we'll give you a little taste of that later, but you'll see all the beautiful faces of the storytellers there. So just as we in our process really tried to honor that exchange, you know, we ask that people who are receiving these stories in the future through the website receive those stories with care, and as people are receiving that stories, consider everyone's responsibility to that storyteller. So what steps can individuals, can people, can organizations take after listening to these stories to contribute to this forward movement in education, indigenizing education, decolonizing education. I would add that exchanges took place in Jojage, at Concordia, at Dawson, at McGill, at the Native Friendship Center, in Winnestage, in Minnewago, sometimes in people's homes, also in the north, in Nunavik, in Kuujjuaq and Kangasujjuaq. And we were able to collaborate as well with a wonderful organization called Our World, which does film workshops and trainings in communities. So Our World did workshops at Dawson and Ganawake at the Ganawake Library, and in Kangasujjuaq in Nunavik. So some of our community members were able to make narrative creative films like Pasha's that we'll show you. So I'm not going to say anything else right now, but I do want to show you a short film. It's 4.5 minutes. It's something that kind of gives you a taste of some of the outcomes of the project, some of the stories, and a bit of a feel for the community. And then I will pass it on to my colleagues. Do I have screen sharing? Can I do that? Okay.
The more there is of Inuit and all Indigenous people in post-secondary education, it's gonna motivate a lot of younger people to go in that route too, and to eventually be self-determined people.
Success is taking the best formal education you're receiving and merging it with the wisdom of your ancestors.
I'm doing this because I'm thinking about everything that I've been through. And when I heard about it, I said, I want to be a part of that because I don't want anyone to give up.
I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. I don't think I would be able to get as far as I have without all the support that I had from my parents, my family, to get this far.
I really think it's the people around us who help us get through these barriers or make us strong enough to do the work we need to do.
Indigenous education is like that. Everybody has their own part, and so everybody learns as one.
Sunaliman avongalo onna pistillagalo tutintuinausta pistillagalo angayoktoaro mipigusuutsaaqqugu.
There's a lot of good things that come with college, as well as a lot of hardships, but they're worth it because you're not going to be in school forever. You're just there to get better educated and better yourself and take those tools and bring it to wherever you want to apply it to.
As a people, we all have our dreams and our hopes and aspirations, and we have different things that we want to do. My sister did art, and I know there's students who are like going into education, and others another one who wants to become a pharmacist.
We are capable. We have gone through a lot in history, and we are still here today. It's not going to be easy in the education system because a lot of it is bureaucracy and it's not our way of doing, but we're, I guess, slowly trying to find a way that fits us and trying to make changes in the system so that our voices are heard too.
I'm hoping that someday there's going to be stageships in universities up in Nunavik could be more Inuit-oriented, and I think that's very important, and it would help with our self-determination.
change is going to happen.
So as you can see, many partners, many collaborators. Some of the storytellers are speaking to some of the challenges. And I think ultimately that was the impetus for the project. As a teacher at college, I had witnessed and talked with many students about some of the barriers they were facing. Students coming down from small communities and feeling really like they had arrived on a new planet, coming down to do post-secondary. So we really wanted to hear what Indigenous students had to say, what they envisioned for the future, what they wanted, to be really the impetus for advocacy to make change. And I think what was also very, very important is that we recognize, and I've come to recognize so much more through the course of this project, that central to movement forward really has to be honoring, recognizing, celebrating, validating of Indigenous ways of knowing, of learning, of teaching. Education doesn't just happen in an institution. Our peoples have been sharing knowledge for survival for generations. And look, we're still here, right? That's worth something. That's incredibly valuable. So I think it's about supporting and say offering solidarity to communities to envision what education looks like for them and the path they want to take. So that's a big learning I think I've taken from this project. So perhaps I'll pass it on to Morgan. Maybe Morgan, I could put the website up. You can just get a sneak peek of the website, and then Morgan, maybe do you want to talk a little bit about our methodology?
Sure. So I have my PhD in education from McGill, and I've also been trained with the Kahnawake Schools Diabetes Prevention Project here in the community in terms of participatory research. So, this project was really about decolonizing and working with students in a really participatory way. I will say that this is the best project that I've ever worked on. I also worked on a project several years ago on resilience. It was called Roots of Resilience. And I really like that project, and it's similar to this because, the way we do research today in contemporary times with Indigenous scholars is really about looking at the positive things, like really using strength-based approaches to research where, rather than looking at the deficits, there's a lot of good things happening in Indian country, we call it. So it's important that we highlight the good things that are going on, the resiliency, the language revitalization. And so, so when we worked with the students, it was really about, it was really youth-driven. The research process was really about training students in a participatory way, meaning that the students and the researchers that we worked with were involved in every the whole process. For example, when we were creating the research questions, we included the students to help us refine the questions. And all along the way, when we collected our data, we would show preliminary results. So we created like these little community advisory groups, and we would bring it to them and say, okay, how does this look? Does that sound right? And then even continuing on to the data analysis, and then really, I think Pasha was saying that, the good part of this was bringing our students with us to international conferences and flattening that hierarchy, all sitting on the panel as equals, and seeing our students become confident and making films. And so that's a really decolonizing way of, being prepared to advocate for your students. And if you're working with the bureaucracy of within the college and the university, of being prepared to be more flexible and work with the university. So these are some of the things that we did, and it's all included in the website. I think that's about it for now. I don't want to take too much time. We also created a research manual. It's about 50 pages, and it talks about decolonizing research and participatory research, and a step-by-step how to work through a project like this. So we have a lot of resources on this website for families, for educators, and for students looking for information to find out about research and different resources. Michelle?
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I was getting excited about the site.
Yeah.
So Pasha, here, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and then Pasha, maybe, do you want to show your film right away and then talk, or talk a bit and then show your film?
We can show my film first.
Okay, let's do it. Hang on, I'm getting there. Okay, there we go. Oh wait, sorry, I didn't optimize. Hang on a second. Hang on. I want to click that little button so that it's optimized video. There we go. Okay, it's good. And sometimes the audio lags. Story of Pasha.
I've always had a strong connection to my name. I was named after my grandma. When I was younger, I was always really curious about where my name came from. My mom told me that I was named after my grandmother, Pasha. So when I got older, I learned that my name is actually shared by many people. All of the oldest children in every branch of our family holds the name Pasha. So for every aunt and uncle I have, their oldest child is named Pasha. I also have a sister with the name Pasha, which I always found really interesting. I also share my name with my little brother. When my little brother was born, my mom decided to name him in accordance to my name. My name is Pasha April Lucina Namayu Christina Partridge. My little brother's name, Lucasy Susie Charles Ituk Michelle Partridge. All of his names go together with my name. So the name Pasha and Lucasy, they were our grandparents. The name is special and unique, and there's a strong story to it. Have you ever wondered where your name comes from?
Okay, sorry guys, there was a little bit of lag there. My son is in the next room doing his online school, so I think that has something to do with it.
So I was very lucky to be able to make my film. It was with the project that I got to make it. We had 2 weeks to make the film, and it was a really interesting experience because there was a lot of support to make the films. We had mentors that were supporting us throughout the whole project, and I feel like that was very important for completing the films. It was kind of a very decolonized kind of setting in the sense that there was a lot of food offered. We were able to schedule our own times when we wanted to show up. We weren't forced to show up at like 3 to 5, and that was the only time that we had available. They actually asked us when we wanted to show up, when we were available, so that we can focus on making our films. And I feel like that was really important because it allowed for our stories to actually come out the way we wanted the story to come out. When I first started making my film, I didn't know what I wanted to make it about. I decided that I wanted to be the teacher instead of being taught. So in my film, I'm teaching people about my name, and it's something that I learned from my mom. So it's intergenerational knowledge that's being shared in my film. I thought that was a very important thing to highlight because our parents are the ones that teach us first. They're our first teachers. So I feel like the film really shows that. We were asked to make the film about education, and I was wondering how my film actually related to education, and I was like, oh, it does relate to education actually. I'm teaching. So as a research assistant, I learned a lot about research. I actually went into the social sciences in CEGEP. So I learned about research, but I never actually got to do a research. I mean, we did practice things like to graduate, I had to do a small research project, but it wasn't as big scale as this research. So I actually, I was a little nervous to go into research at first because when I was learning about it in school, it felt really clinical. It felt very like you have to follow all the steps and stuff. So it felt overwhelming for me. But once I got into this research project, I learned that research isn't exactly what it is in books. I realized that it could be fun, engaging. It can teach you so much. It taught me so much about confidence, like things that I wouldn't even think about. Yeah. So some of the things that I learned as a research assistant is that it might feel violating at the beginning, like when you don't know what to expect, but once you start expecting, like once you understand what you're going through, it becomes easier. So as a participant, I'm talking as a participant, not as the researcher. So as a participant, it can feel really violating. But this research project actually did a really good job in making sure it was ethical. It was kind. We were given a lot of consent forms, a lot of conversations about being able to withdraw your consent whenever you want. And it was highlighted in bold to me that I'm able to withdraw whenever I want. And I feel like that was really important for the research because I was a little scared to share my educational story at the beginning. I wasn't sure if my story was good enough or all these questions that a lot of students have, like I didn't have faith in myself. But after watching my film, my video, the research, the interview that I had with the project, I actually feel like I learned so much about myself. The project not only helped me, but it also it not only helped the research, but it also helped me as a person. Like I got to see myself a little bit more under a different kind of lens that I don't usually look at myself in. Research has a lot of layers, and that's something I learned is it's actually pretty fun if you do it the right way. This project did, it allowed us to make connections. Like I met a lot of people. I got to network so much. I met so many amazing people, and it's been a really awesome experience. Like, I can't even express how amazing it's been. It's been incredibly long since the project has began, and I don't remember a lot of what's happened in the past, but as I recollect all these memories, I'm like in awe of how well this project was conducted. I got to meet Morgan and Michelle on a regular basis to meet up so that we can go through the data and categorize the different things that we saw. We did so much together, like it was team building, and it was really eye-opening. It was also very honoring because we got to learn about other educational experiences from other students from all kinds of backgrounds. Some students had a really hard time getting to school, or some students had a really hard time in their family. So there were different barriers that we were all facing, and it was really interesting to see the similarities and the differences. And I feel like the project did a really good job at highlighting those variances. So checking out all the different, like if you listen to any of the interviews on the website, you'll see a lot of the differences right away, and you'll see the similarities. And I feel like highlighting those differences has allowed the project to move forward in a very good way. It's going to be very helpful for the future, and I'm actually really excited for when I go back to school, because I feel like there are already changes happening. So yeah, I think that's about what I wanted to say.
Nakamik Pasha, thanks so much. So you think 5 years is long? Come on, let's do it for another 5. I'm ready. Sophie, would you like to share?
Hi, everyone. Pasha, that was so well said. And there's so many things that you mentioned. I'm like, yes, me too. Yes, yes, yes. The storytelling exchange was so eye-opening for many of us students. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit before I get onto that aspect. So I graduated high school in Northern Quebec in Yanamarik High School in Kuujjuaq. I actually graduated with a Governor General's Award. So I've always been very committed with my education. I've always pushed myself to the limit. Sorry. And so for me in my educational journey, it's always been super fun and enjoyable learning new things. But one thing I would like to bring up too is the culture shock that I endured when I moved down south, because that was something I was not prepared for or ready to experience on my own, being a very young 18, 19-year-old moving away from an isolated community and moving to basically a concrete jungle full of automobiles and taking over 1 hour to 3 hours just to get to our destination, especially with Montreal traffic. Woo! Summer times, all that fun jazz stuff we endure in the city. So that's something I was never prepared for, never taught, and a lot of things like time management, budgeting, all these little things that a lot of students in the South are equipped with, a lot of us Inuit students are not, because living in an isolated community, it takes like 5-10 minutes to get to point A to point B. Whereas when you move down south, you have to really prepare and plan ahead of time in order to get to your destination. And hopefully things will get better with traffic and construction, maybe by the time my grandchildren are born. One thing that I really, really enjoyed with this storytelling exchange is I always felt alone when I was especially in SAGEP. So I went to John Abbott College and I graduated with social sciences back in 2015. So I got there in 2012, graduated, and continued with my education. So education has always been super important to me, because this was something important, not only to my parents, but also my grandfather was always encouraging me to continue with my education. And not many of my family members have a degree either in high school, and I believe I was one of the first students to in my family to graduate with a CEGEP degree. So education is extremely important to my grandfather, and he supports me very much. So I continue that journey, and also to push myself. And one thing I really enjoyed about telling my story, similar to Pasha, was I was in a huge rush. You could see me in the video, the introductory video. That was actually the day I told my story. It was a beautiful feast lunch that was provided, and I had the time and privilege to attend that. And then Michelle actually just grabbed me and said, "Hey, come on, you can tell your story in a very short bit." I'm like, "Yeah, but I have class in like 20 minutes. I don't have time." She's like, "No, you do have time. Come into this room and you'll tell your story." So I told my story, and I really didn't realize how emotional I would become. And looking back onto my video, where at one point, like, I did start crying, and I'm like, "Can you please cut that out?" Because personally, I never told my story. That was the first time I even opened up about my story. And it was very unique for me to look back on it today to see how far I've come, and to see the emotion that that it brought out in me, and to hear other stories where they're extremely similar to me, and it made me feel less alone and less isolated, because I managed to create such a beautiful friendship and a little community in in all these different institutes that I've been attending since I moved down south. So one thing I would like to bring up too is like recommendations for the future. One thing that I really do hope, especially for Inuit students, because there's a lot of Inuit that are coming down south, is that maybe, hopefully, potentially, there's a lot of hope there, that we can be prepared better for our huge move to the south. So we're taught how to budget and time manage, and how to write essays and research. That was something I never ever did when I was in the north. I never had homework. I never had any. I never had a foundation for the type of education that I was going to have in the south. So I really learned the ropes from the bottom up. And I struggled extremely. And something I really emphasized in my video that I had to teach myself was a grade does not define my learning. Because when I first moved down south, I was failing, and to the point where I'm like, education is not for me. Why am I here? Why am I dealing with anxiety and stress when I'm not even good at it? But then I start telling myself, no, why is this D telling me I can't do something when I learned so much more from the material, but the grade provided back was the reflection of my lack of knowledge on how to present and prepare a paper, right? So it's been a huge learning curve, and I'm really, really proud to say that I am beyond ecstatic and happy to be where I am today. And it's all these amazing people that I've met along the way, and the communities that I've created, that has helped me continue with my education. So I really do appreciate and acknowledge everybody that I've met along the way, and do hope that I continue creating such a beautiful community, and creating a home away from home. Thank you.
Sophie, thank you so much.
Bitaw na ko, Mick.
I wonder now, if Morgan, Pasha, Sophie, if you want to add again, if there are any things that came up in each of the presentations that you want to add on to, or things that we may have missed.
I have a graphic on here I could share.
Okay.
The data. Let's see if I could do this. I don't think it's the final version, but let's see here. So it was a big, like someone had said earlier, it was a really big data set. There was many interviews, and we broke it down by nation. So we had Inuit stories, we had Cree stories, we had Ganyakehaga stories, and we had many stories from different nations. We put that in all with Jogjaga and Montreal. So one of the things that we do in a decolonizing way of doing research or participatory research is we don't compare. So Indigenous people have been compared in research projects. So we were really careful not to compare, but what we did was we hired a local graphic artist. And so we have this one is really a generalized way of looking at all of the data put together. You could just imagine how much data there is. I have a pile right here of all the transcripts. So in this circle here, what we did was we looked at we categorized challenges in terms of personal, institutional, like Sophie talked about earlier, some of the challenges coming down from the South. One of the things that came out in the data was like the students expressed, and there was a lot of emotion. There was like a lot of times crying, and some of the students, like for example, they might be in a classroom, say it's an Indigenous studies class, and maybe the professor might be a non-native person teaching about Indigenous ways. And so the teacher might ask the student, like, how many, might ask her class or his class, how many Indigenous students are in the class. So you put your hand up, including myself, and then the teacher might say, oh, okay, good, we have an Indigenous person in the class. You're going to be our expert. You're going to help. So the students express to us that that is a big burden on their shoulders, and it causes them stress and sometimes trauma. And so anyway, that was one of the challenges. We also looked at transformation. A lot of students taught us, the participants talked about, they might come to a college or university with even their own identity issues. And so a lot of the people that we spoke to really during their educational journey went through their own transformation. So that was a really big thing. And also we looked at institutional transformation. There's a lot of good things happening in the universities and the colleges in terms of decolonizing and indigenizing, and, like, for example, giving your acknowledge of the land at the beginning of these conferences. So there's a lot of good stuff happening there. We looked at structural barriers, racism, and then another big thing that came out in the data was all of the supports, like most students talked about the importance of the Aboriginal student resource centers in each academic institution. So students would go there to have a home away from home, to be with like-minded students, to share food, to share ceremonies. So those are really important to our Indigenous students. And so I just wanted to share. Oh, I better stop there. I could go on and on. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Morgan, that's great. Pasha, did you want to add anything? No obligation. It's totally fine.
I don't mind. There was I didn't really talk about my educational journey, so I'll just mention a few things. I actually left Kuujjuaq to move to Montreal when I was 14 years old. So I went to high school in Montreal. So I didn't face the same barriers that Sophie faced coming to CEGEP. So for me, I graduated in Montreal, and I didn't have to travel very far from my home to get to my CEGEP. So I had a lot of support from my high school to apply for college, to do all these things. And I had a lot of support in doing that. And that's one of the differences I noticed from my Inuit friends that come from Kuujjuaq to Montreal, is that was one of the biggest differences I had. So I didn't experience the culture shock the same way. I didn't realize how difficult it is. When I first moved here when I was 14, I experienced the culture shock, and it was really hard for me to adjust. Like my grades weren't really good at the beginning, but then as I adjusted to living here, my grades got better. And so I just wanted to mention that. I was also one of the first ones in my family to graduate CEGEP, and in the video that you see, I noticed that I smile really big, And it seems like I'm proud of myself, but actually I'm a little sad about that. I wish I had more family members that had degrees, so that I can talk about my educational experience with my families. When I talk about my educational experience with my families, a lot of them think that I'm trying to be better than them. And so I try to not talk about my educational experience too much, because I don't want them to feel like I think I'm better than them because I went to CEGEP. That doesn't make me better. I'm just the same. I just experience things differently. So that's another issue that comes up with a lot of Indigenous people is we don't have a lot of family members who have higher education. So that might be an issue that is experienced. I've heard other students mention it in the past. Another thing is one of the biggest supports that I had was my mom. She only made it to grade 7. So she always mentioned that to me. She'd always be like, Bunny, I only made it to grade 7. Can you go further? Can you do better? I want to see you go to university. So when I actually did go to university, she was extremely proud. And she wasn't disappointed in me for leaving university. She was actually really proud of me for understanding my own mental health. I ended up leaving university because I got depressed and I didn't feel like I had the supports around me. I felt really alone, like Sophie did when she first showed up to CEGEP. Because in college, I had a lot of supports, like a lot. There was the Inuit Student Center, the Student Resource, I don't remember the name of it by now, but there was the Inuit residence where there were Inuit counselors there to help students. And I went there often to print my papers because I didn't have any money to print it at the school, or I went there often when I was feeling really lonely, so I'd go see other Inuit there. So I had a lot of support in CEGEP, but then once I went to university, which is downtown, there wasn't as much support. So that was one of the issues that I had when I first went there is I felt really lonely suddenly. After having so many Inuit around me to having only one Inuk around me, it felt really lonely. I decided to leave, and I feel okay with the decision now. At first I was feeling really guilty, but now I feel confident in my decision. I do still want to go back to education. I still see myself pursuing education because it's something that's really passionate for me. I'd also like to prove to my mom that I can go get a doctorate like she talks about sometimes. So that's one of my goals. And I'm really happy that she was one of my biggest supports actually, because my mom and I don't have the greatest relationship. It's a long story. So it's really great when I think about my educational story to think of someone who wasn't so close to me in my life is someone who actually supported me to go the furthest. Yeah, that's something I just wanted to mention. And transformation wise, I could think of, when I first started in CEGEP, I was really quiet, shy, but I'm slowly becoming a little bit more confident as I progress through my experience in life. And I feel like education had a really big contribution to that. And also this project, because throughout this project, I had to share my educational story so many times, it's become kind of second nature to me. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it.
Right on. Thanks, Pasha. If you choose to pursue your doctorate, Dr. Partridge sounds really nice. Dr. Partridge. Sophie, did you want to add anything before we take questions?
No, not really. I actually really love answering questions. So I'm more open to the idea of questions and answers. But Pasha, that was so beautifully said. And again, I definitely relate to a lot of things that you just mentioned, and just like kudos for continuing, and just so happy to see that we have such a safe space right now to be able to share this. And I'm so happy to be a part of this. So please ask away. I would love to answer some questions.
Okay, there are two things that I want to say before questions that I think are important barriers that we need to advocate for change. One is French language requirements in CEGEP. for Indigenous students, and one is supports for students who want to pursue STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. And for French, as you may know, in English CEGEPs, students are required to do 2 credited French courses to get their DEC. And we're advocating for flexibility. So that, for instance, students who have really struggled in high school French, or students, say there are many students in Cree-Territory and UHE who have never done French before in high school, and they have to do French in CEGEP. To be able to do those 2 credited courses, they have to do a number of pre-credited courses. It can be 4, 5, 6. They can complete all their DEC requirements, but what prevents them from getting that DEC is French. So that's one thing we want to look at. Also, I know that in the Vienne Commission recommendations, it's come out that official professional orders need to look at that French requirement as well for Indigenous nurses, say people working in the medical profession, people who might need to be part of a professional order, really advocating so that students who, you know, haven't done French before in their life, they don't have to do that French exam to be able to, say, work as a nurse in their community. I think it's something really important. We heard that a lot. And the second thing, again, is a lot of students are not able to get the prerequisites to study science and math in CEGEP in their home community. So if you want to become a doctor, go into the medical field or engineering or another technical field, you have to do prerequisite courses in the city. Oftentimes that means then adding 1.5 years, 2 years, 3 years onto your CEGEP time. When you want to be back home, you know, or you want to be with your kids, or whatever, like it's a big, I found it's a big disruption for people. It seems like, oh, just spend a year and do your prereqs. It's a lot more than that. So those are just 2 sort of very concrete things. So, okay, 5 to 1 questions. You can just add in the chat or just speak out.
Move your mic if you want to speak.
We can't bite you. Come on, ask away.
Okay, well, maybe I have a little question for you.
Just go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. I was just wondering, you spoke about being in a class with a non-Indigenous teacher, or do you have on the spot right there, Pasha and Sophie, like tricks or sorry, I have the word in Spanish, advices for a non-Indigenous teacher teaching in Indigenous studies with Indigenous students?
I can think of one thing. I think hiring Indigenous people to talk about those Indigenous topics would be a really good one, so that the students aren't being the experts in the classroom. Hire an expert, so that the expert could be the one teaching the students instead of the students teaching the class. Yeah, that's the only one I can think of at the moment.
For me, I'll just add in, it's just a bit of research as well, and being more open to the answers that are provided, because sometimes people assume that the answer is going to be very straightforward, but then our answers are kind of like telling a story, and then people say, well, that's not the answer I was seeking. But if you really think back to what we were providing the answers for in that story, we were answering the question. So it's just being more open-minded to how Indigenous people respond. Sometimes it's not going to be A to Z. We're going to go A, D, F, like we're going to go in different story mode, but we're still answering that question. So it's just a different perspective to keep in mind.
Yes, and also to maybe in your classroom to I don't know, be more compassionate, or to be like to really listen to the other students, because sometimes for example, I remember in a sociology class I had taken, the teacher showed the Oka crisis video, 270 years of resistance, and it triggered something in me, and I remember sitting in the classroom, and it was dark, and I was crying, and why am I crying? It triggers these things for us. like if you might be teaching about residential schools, so just to be maybe just be aware of things that are triggered, or sometimes students will just laugh at us. I remember in an anthropology class at Concordia, we had a lesson about Ishi. I don't know if anyone's heard about Ishi. He lived in California, and I think one of the anthropologists put him into a museum. I ended up reading the book, but the students in the class were laughing, and it made me cry. I remember going home on the bus, crying on the way home. I just felt so sad for this man, and the students in the class were laughing, and the professor didn't do anything. So I was really, really hurt about that. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah, there's some really great advice from participants in the project in a 20-minute video for teachers on the website. So if you go on the website is fppsc.net. There's so much there. Take some time, spend some time, get into listening mode, get cozy, bring some snacks, and just spend some time with our storytellers. But the 20-minute for teachers video, it's very powerful. Share it with your colleagues, yeah, lots of advice there. I recall Pasha, some really excellent advice about dealing with sensitive topics and trigger warnings. It's really, really important. So yeah, so you can hear different recommendations from students there and family members.
I have a question, if that's okay. I was wondering if you feel that it would be good if universities and CGIPs would offer more housing possibilities and support in that way, and also maybe daycare if needed. And so I'm curious how you struggled with that, because I know it's a big issue, and it could maybe also help with isolation. Like I'm thinking of, I think it's John Abbott that has all the Inuit students who are living together. So I'm wondering what you think about that.
Who would like to respond?
One thing I would like to bring up, as an Inuk from Northern Quebec, because of the James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement, us Inuit are accommodated relatively well for housing and daycare. But I know for other Indigenous nations, especially the Cree boards, their system is not as well equipped compared to Inuit. So yes, I highly agree that there should be an update or an upgrade to student housing and daycare accommodations for Indigenous students, because that is a huge barrier that causes a lot of students to go home. I don't know if anyone else wants to add into that as well.
I think it's really important to note that a lot of Indigenous people have babies when they're young. So there are a lot of Indigenous people with babies. So having daycares is really important. So I find it really amazing that you actually mentioned daycares in your question.
I also just wanted to really thank you for all these stories and for everything you have shared. I think it's just extremely rich for all of us to go forward together. So thank you very much.
Thank you as well. That was a beautiful question.
Oh, it looks like there's a lot of questions. I mean, we're welcome to stay on a little bit if people have. Should we stay on a little longer?
It's fine by me.
I'm okay to stay a bit longer.
Okay.
Same for me.
There's a Morgan, you okay? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, I was just reading the question.
Okay, do you want me to read that one out? I was thinking about, from Maria Tawaganye, thank you. I was thinking about the Indigenous student centers in universities, but then maybe they are not specific enough, especially for Inuit students. Do you see a need for more culturally specific student centers? Maybe a collaboration between different university student centers to do culturally specific activities or support with students from different institutions. Thank you so much for everything you shared. Any thoughts?
I go to Concord. I'm taking a semester off for my mental health. I lost my cousin in January. So at Concordia, we do have a student resource center. It has such a beautiful Indigenous name, and I haven't gone to the center since a while now, but I find that just having that resource there has helped me so much. And I do hope that McGill does improve their Indigenous resource centers and stuff. But collaborating with other universities and schools would be such a beautiful idea. And I believe there were a few things that were done but I'm not 100%. But I do know that Concordia has such a beautiful, strong student resource available for us Indigenous students.
There's a lot. In fact, I was speaking the other day to Manon Tremblay at the out of Indigenous Directions and out of Concordia the other day, and she was saying that there's a lot of things happening. They're even looking to plan an inter-university thing, at least in the English sector, in terms of sharing each other's decolonization plans and calls to action. And they're as we speak, they have some positions being posted. So I find that Quebec is a little bit behind from like compared to out west. The universities out there, they have, I think from what I've seen, they have a little bit more going on, but they're certainly catching up, and there's a lot of good things happening between the universities. Yeah, so those collaborations are being very seriously talked about. Yeah, that's what I could say to that.
Maybe I would just add, as instructor in Journeys. Journeys is the First Peoples Transition Program at Dawson College, a one-year program. I coordinated the program for 4 years, and I found students in that program really enjoyed learning from each other, from students of different nations. So they really enjoyed that contact and connection and ability to build relationships with students from other nations. I know that there were always concerns. I remember an Inuk student actually just feeling that there wasn't enough Inuit content. You know, things tended to be First Nations content. And I mean, even in our project, I remember, Morgan, the first talking circle that we had, and we had a smudge. And I remember it was expressed by an Inuk participant that she wasn't comfortable with the smudge. Not because it wasn't like, oh, it's weird. It's just, it made her feel ill. You know, it wasn't something she grew up with. It wasn't something that was part of her. So, you know, that was something that we learned along the way to be able to really, I don't know, acknowledge and, you know, carry like all perspectives and ways, you know. So when we had our launch in February, it's really important for us to have a hula lighting as part of our ceremony to honor the Inuit participants and storytellers. So yeah, maybe last question. Oh, okay. From Maria Eugenia Longo, thank you, Pasha and Sophie, beautiful stories. How does access to post-secondary experience change your relationship to time and to youth, or if they changed? In other words, has your experience changed your relationship to time or the perception as young people in general? That's interesting.
I can somewhat answer that. I don't know if it's going to be like the full answer that you're looking for. I just recently came back from Beauvais-Neduk, where I was, where my family resides right now, right now, and I just felt the huge disconnect to my family, my land, my culture, my language, and how I'm still able to fluently speak my language, but there are things that I'm losing in terms of pronunciations and knowledge. And so continuing my education has been an amazing journey, and I appreciate every step I take into continuing. But I'm also losing my own footsteps in my own culture in order to pursue this educational journey. And so similar to what Pasha had mentioned, where we're not trying to become better than our own people, we're just trying to better ourselves. But that perception, the young people are now seeing us older students, oh, well, you're better than us too. And it's just being passed down, that knowledge or that thought that students that go away from home to better their own life or their education return with a negative mindset. So it's hard for us to go back home and have a safe space and to be legible to obtain our own home, because we are no longer legible to apply for housing right away when we get back. So yes, I believe that continuing our post-secondary does hinder and create huge barriers and hurdles for when we return home. But that's also the beauty of it, where we can go back and say, you know, I've been gone for 10 years, but now that I'm back, look at how much change I can help produce for our people and with our people. It's not against our people, it's with and for. And that's that's the mindset that I would really, and I'm hoping that the younger generation will start absorbing. It's this change for Inuit by Inuit.
Right, and many of the students that told their stories, one of, you know, like a big priority for an Indigenous student always in the back of their mind is, like Sophie was saying, that you want to go back to your community and go help your community and help your community grow. And so that's a lot of on the back of an Indigenous student, how they even participating in, say, like a research project. You know, like Indigenous people, we attach ourselves to research projects that are meaningful. Like, it's not an abstract made up project. Like we participate in projects that are meaningful to our communities and our people, and it's gonna make change for the future. So that's the projects that many Indigenous people like to be a part of, because you become part of that change.
So I feel like the conversation could go on, and I encourage you to continue having those conversations. I am struck by, there's so many aspects to this project. You know, there's the education piece, but also the research piece. And I feel I'm left with so many elements to think about. You know, Michelle, you talked about the importance of valuing Indigenous ways of knowing, of our responsibility, and Morgan about the need to be strength-based, youth-driven, participatory, and just the way that you led, you facilitated the research. And Pasha, your work, your comment around research is actually fun if you do it the right way. And your last point, Sophie, around, you know, how do you go about this journey without losing your culture and become an advocate in support of your community? So I think the website, like Michelle said, is hopefully you can engage with it for many more hours. I really want to thank all of you for being here and for the speakers and panelists today. And I hope we can continue the conversation. And I feel, as part of the Youth Research Share, all that you're talking about is really at the core of it. And we're so happy that we're collaborators in this and that we can continue the journey together for the next 3-4 years in supporting your work that you're doing. So thank you so much. And I'll just leave the ending word to Alicia.
Yes, I wanted to just give a big nyawagoa to the 4 panelists here today. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your knowledge, and being present here, as well to our interpreter, Danielle, for interpreting this entire thing today, and for everyone in attendance. Thank you so much for being present and listening to and asking questions. Thank you so much. And also letting everyone know that our next lunchtime talk is happening April 30th on the topic of youth community mobilization. So we hope to see you there. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page for the event. And thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. And see you next time.